The city skyline looked like it was dipped in gold, the last streaks of sunlight painting the glass towers outside my window. I stood there in my silk blouse, coffee in one hand, scrolling through emails on my phone when the notification popped up, a reminder about my sister's engagement anniversary. A detail I hadn't asked to remember, but my parents made sure I never forgot. A sharp breath caught in my throat. That night flashed across my mind like it happened yesterday. The sound of champagne flutes clinking, the gasps in the room, my mother's proud voice announcing to everyone that my sister was being gifted $1.5 million in shares. For her future, they said, smiling like royalty bestowing treasures. Then came the second blow, my father's glance at me, his words low but sharp. Don't make a scene. I sipped my coffee now, the bitterness grounding me, though my chest tightened. They never saw the scene I wanted to make, the one that played over and over in my head, demanding to know why my dreams, my hard work, my worth had never been measured the same way. But I didn't give them that satisfaction. I smiled, I stayed quiet, and I walked away. What they didn't know was that silence became my greatest weapon. I was 24 the night of my sister Emily's engagement, still figuring out life, still carrying student loans on my back, still hoping my parents would see me for more than the daughter, who wasn't quite enough. Emily was always the shining one, straight teeth, perfect GPA, her fiancé from a family with old money. I, on the other hand, was the one with calloused hands from part-time jobs and messy hair pulled into a bun because I couldn't afford the salon trips my mother insisted were basic grooming. I remember standing at the edge of the banquet hall, wearing a dress I bought on clearance, tugging at the zipper that pinched my ribs. My hands shook around the glass of sparkling water I clutched like armor. Then the announcement came, my parents smiling, glowing, voices thick with pride as they revealed the $1.5 million in shares they were gifting Emily. The room gasped, applauded. Cameras flashed. I felt my chest hollow out. That lump lodged itself in my throat so firmly, I thought I'd choke. Then came my father's words, his hand brushing my elbow as though guiding me toward silence. Don't make a scene. I nodded, though my inside screamed. I wanted to yell that I wasn't invisible, that I worked 2 jobs to pay my rent, that I had dreams bigger than anyone in that room could imagine. But my mother's eyes flicked over me, cool, dismissive, and I knew my voice wouldn't matter.
Not to them.
Later that night, I slipped out onto the balcony. The city lights blurred as tears welled, my breath catching in the cold air. That's when I felt the soft weight of a shawl draped over my shoulders. My grandmother, quiet, observant, the only one who ever saw through me, stood beside me. You don't need their stage to prove yourself, she whispered, her hand closing mine around the edge of the shawl. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the start of something bigger. Remember, child, the world is wide, but your strength is wider. Her words stayed, and so did the shawl, woven, slightly frayed at the edges, smelling faintly of lavender. That night, while Emily's ring sparkled under the chandeliers, I made my choice. I wouldn't beg for scraps of validation anymore. I would leave. I would find a place where my voice wasn't just heard, it mattered. And I promised myself, one day, they would see me not as the daughter who stayed quiet, but as the woman who built everything in silence. Leaving wasn't glamorous. I packed my life into 2 suitcases and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and neighbors who argued through paper-thin walls. I worked mornings at a cafe, nights at a bookstore, and in between I scribbled ideas in a notebook that smelled of spilled espresso. The shawl my grandmother gave me was always draped over the back of my chair, like a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone, even when loneliness pressed down on me. I wanted to build something of my own, but I didn't know where to start. The world of business and finance felt like a locked room, and I didn't have the key. Until I met her. Clara Jensen, a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and fearless, who came into the cafe every morning with a laptop and a stack of papers. She ordered the same thing, black coffee, no sugar, and tipped generously. One afternoon, when she noticed me sketching designs in my notebook, she asked, "Why are you hiding that talent behind an apron?"
It startled me.
No one had ever called it talent before. Clara was a venture capitalist, though she never introduced herself with titles. She just believed in me. She invited me to coffee outside of work, asked me about my ideas, listened in a way my own parents never did. With her guidance, I learned to pitch,
To plan. To risk.
Nights blurred into mornings as I worked on my first product line. Simple, affordable organizational tools for women juggling too much, like I had been. The website went live at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember my heart racing as I clicked publish, wondering if anyone out there would care. The first order came in 2 days later, from a woman in Chicago. Then another from Denver. Then 20 more by the end of the month. They weren't big numbers, but each one felt like someone out there whispering, I see you. Of course, there were failures. Suppliers who ghosted me, shipments that went missing, nights I collapsed on the floor surrounded by boxes, sobbing into my shawl. But Clara reminded me that no empire was built without bruises. You're stronger than the doors that close on you, she'd say, her voice steady like stone. Slowly, the wins piled up. My first big client signed a wholesale order worth more than I made in 3 months of cafe shifts. I reinvested every cent. I taught myself marketing, design, and negotiation. I learned how to command a room, even when I was the youngest and only woman sitting at the table. Through it all, I kept my family in the dark. On social media, I posted nothing but vague snapshots. A latte here, a sunset there. To them, I was still the quiet one, the daughter who never asked for anything. And I let them believe it, because I wasn't ready to show them what I was building. Not yet. Not until I was certain the silence that once weighed me down would roar loud enough to fill every corner of the room they had once shut me out of. It was 5 years later when my parents finally came knocking, quite literally. Emily's husband had made a series of bad investments, and the family business my father once bragged about was hemorrhaging money. They called, left messages, even sent me an email, my mother, who swore she wasn't the type to beg, typing words that carried more desperation than pride. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Instead, I told them to meet me at my office. The day arrived gray and drizzly, but inside my building, the light was warm and golden. The elevator doors opened directly into the 24th floor, my floor. The space stretched wide, glass walls framing the city skyline like a living painting. Polished wood floors, modern art pieces, fresh flowers and vases. It wasn't ostentation. It was a reflection of every sleepless night, every scar earned, every ounce of belief I had poured into my company. I watched them step out of the elevator. My parents, stiff in their tailored coats, and Emily, her eyes ringed with fatigue. They looked around, blinking, their footsteps hesitant, as if they weren't sure they belonged there. Whose office is this? My father asked, his voice wavering with something I'd never heard before, uncertainty. Mine, I said. Calm, steady. The words seemed to echo. They froze. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. Emily's eyes swept the room. My desk, my awards framed on the wall, the logo of my company etched in glass behind me. Recognition dawned slowly, painfully, as if the truth resisted settling in. You? My father's brows knitted. You built this. I smiled faintly.
Yes.
While you thought I was invisible, I was building an empire. While you handed my sister millions, I learned how to multiply pennies. And while you told me not to make a scene, I made a life. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse tighter. Emily lowered her gaze, cheeks flushed, shame flickering across her features. I let them sit in that silence, let them drink in every detail of the room. The sleek shelves lined with my products, the photos of me with global partners, the articles framed from Forbes and Entrepreneur magazines. Proof that I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Finally, my father cleared his throat. We didn't realize. No. I cut in gently but firmly. You didn't care to realize. There's a difference. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The power wasn't in shouting. It was in the restraint, the calm control that came from finally standing on equal ground, no, higher ground. Emily looked at me then, her eyes glassy. Why didn't you tell us? She whispered. I let out a soft laugh. Because you never wanted to listen. And because sometimes the best revenge isn't telling. It's showing. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air, wrapping around us like invisible chains. For the first time in my life, they weren't looking at me as the quiet, lesser daughter. They were looking at me as something they couldn't quite define, powerful, untouchable, undeniable. And it was in that moment, as they sat across from me in the office I built with my own hands, that I knew the tables had turned. This time, I was the one holding the pen, writing the story, setting the rules. They sat across from me in the conference room, its glass walls framing the rain streaking down the cityscape. I folded my hands on the polished oak table, the shawl draped across my chair like a quiet crown. For years, they dictated the terms of my life. Tonight, the script was mine. I know why you're here, I said evenly. The business is failing. The investments collapsed. And now you want me to clean up the mess. My father's jaw tightened. My mother bristled, her fingers tightening around her pearl necklace. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her eyes flicking from me to the floor. I'm not cruel, I continued. But if I'm going to help, it won't be for free. Not in money. In change. They blinked, startled. I leaned forward, my voice firm but calm. Emily, you've spent your life being sheltered, handed everything, told you're special. You want me to invest in you? Then you're going to start something of your own. From scratch. No shortcuts. I'll match every dollar you put in yourself, but I won't carry you. Her lips parted, eyes wide, but she nodded slowly, as if she already knew the truth of what I said. I turned to my mother. You've spent years diminishing me, my clothes, my choices, my silence. If you want a seat at my table, you'll use your sharp tongue for something better. Mentor women who feel small. Volunteer your time. Prove to me that you can lift instead of tear down. Her face flushed, a mixture of indignation and something softer, maybe shame. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. No excuses. Action only. Finally, I looked at my father. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time in my life, he seemed smaller than me. You told me not to make a scene, I said quietly. That night, you silenced me. If you want my partnership now, you'll have to listen. Really listen. To me, to others. And you'll have to accept that your daughter is no longer the child in the corner. I am the leader here. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then you can walk away with nothing. The air vibrated with tension. They weren't used to conditions, especially from me. But I didn't waver. Compassion glowed beneath my firmness. I wasn't here to destroy them. I was here to teach them what life had forced me to learn. Growth doesn't come from gifts. It comes from grit. Emily's voice broke the silence first. I'll do it, she whispered, her hands trembling. I need to learn. You're right. My mother pressed her lips together, eyes glistening. I'll try. And my father, proud, stoic, unbending, finally lowered his head. I'll listen, he murmured, his voice raw. For the first time, the balance of power was mine. Not as revenge, not as punishment, but as a reclamation. I leaned back, letting the weight of the moment settle. Good, I said softly. Because this time, it's on my terms. The weeks that followed felt surreal. For once, I wasn't the outsider looking in. I was the anchor they circled around. Emily called me often, her voice softer now, full of questions about budgeting, networking, how to pitch an idea. She stumbled. She failed. She got back up, and every time she did, I saw a flicker of the woman she could become without the cushion of entitlement. My mother surprised me most. She began volunteering at a local women's shelter, teaching resume workshops and sharing advice on presentation. At first, I thought it was penance, a performance. But one afternoon, she sent me a picture, a group of women hugging her, smiling with gratitude, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in years. Humility. Maybe even pride, the kind that wasn't about status, but about service. My father took longer. He wasn't used to listening, but slowly he began to. He'd sit through my explanations without interrupting, nodding even when the words were uncomfortable. Once, after a meeting, he lingered behind and said, "You've built something I could never imagine. I'm proud. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And me? I finally allowed myself to breathe. The battles I fought in silence had led me here, to this office, to this power, to this strange reconciliation. The scars remained, but they no longer hurt. They reminded me of the journey, of the woman I became when the world told me to stay quiet. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted my office in gold, I reached for my grandmother's shawl. I held it close, breathing in the faint lavender that still clung to its threads. She hadn't lived to see this moment, but her words echoed through me like a song. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the start of something bigger. She was right. My silence had grown into something mighty, something unshakable. I looked out over the city, its lights sparking to life, and felt a calm strength settle over me. I was no longer the girl told not to make a scene. I was the woman who,